Okay, so WalkMe, you fairly recently published the State of Digital Adoption 2025 Special AI Edition report. I guess the clue is in the name there, so it does focus mainly on the impact of AI in terms of, I suppose, the good and what we may call the not so good, if not the bad. So just, I suppose, a sort of high level view of it, and then we'll drill down into some of the specific findings.
Yeah, no, completely. Thanks, Philip. So it's a report around fundamentally what AI is doing in the industry and how it's actually being incorporated into large organizations globally. Now, fundamentally, what that means is AI is obviously a brand new or newish kind of finding, and it's a lot of organizations are investing heavily in this. But the more important factor about it is, yes, it's not a silver bullet. Everyone kind of thinks it's going to be amazing. It's going to solve loads of issues, but people are still at the central point of all organizations. So change and people are still fundamentally important for success. And what digital adoption does, and the SODA report kind of rightly points out, is how much investment is taking place, but what fruition is actually happening in terms of success. And what I mean by that is when you invest large amounts of money in AI, yes, you can expect things to change. But you need to rely on the folks and the people that are part of the business. And adoption is a key and fundamental part of that. So what we're doing at WalkMe obviously is a digital adoption platform. We are fundamentally putting people at the center point of transformation. And we're fundamentally understanding user journeys. We're understanding what they are trying to achieve and what matters to them. And fundamentally, when we come down to AI, it's the same process, it's the same concept. AI can be placed into any hemisphere and it could be put into vast amounts of tech estates. But if you don't know what you're doing with it, it won't succeed. And more importantly, if you don't know how to use it, it won't succeed. So digital adoption is there to actually help enhance that and actually put this into the kind of spectrum for senior leaders and strategy officers to really realize what adoption really means. But when we think about the grand scheme of a transformation, a lot of people emphasize on the tech spend, the top and bottom line, and they kind of look at what the OPEX and CapEx spends are going to be. But ultimately, it's about ensuring that people are at the heart of this.
Okay, and as we'll come on, AI, as you say, is a game changer if approached in the right way. But I know the report sort of highlights some of the uh, problems that maybe are existing, which I can help address. And I think you looked at the cost and the impact of what you call digital inefficiencies. So please outline what those might be, and I guess the importance of therefore of addressing them.
I would say the kind of main aspects here is to do with guardrails when it comes down to digital inefficiencies. It's about the fact that there's a lack of governance in the workplace when it comes to AI. There's a lot of shadow AI being procured. There's a lot of investment being put in, but a lot of people aren't understanding that framework. So what that means is ultimately you'll have pockets of folks or departments or areas within businesses that are going to procure AI as a solution, thinking it's a silver bullet. But what that does, what that doesn't address is actually how you go about and use it and what are you actually using it for. So actually having the inefficiencies as a highlight in the SODA report is key because it really outlines why digital adoption is so important. And DAP, as we like to call it, and being the pioneers that WalkMe invented that category in the first instance, is all around how to centralize what matters to the end user. So if we think about a currency, what I mean by that is what are you measured on? What do you measure as success in your organization? What does it mean for you? And is it time? Is it is it cycle time? Is it process efficiencies? Is it anything that really matters? Is it your top or bottom line? But fundamentally, what we are doing is there to help support that and bring it to fruition. So the inefficiencies can be grandeur. It could be really, really huge in terms of what that means for an organization. So if I go and invest, say, 24 million, and that's the average at the moment with organizations in this year on AI technologies, but I'm only utilizing a proportion of that, and I think of a bar chart going across horizontally, it's got a vast amount that you can do with it, but I'm only using this much of it, but I don't realize what the potential of that AI technology can actually do. You're actually wasting a lot of money there.
Okay, and in terms of the people bit, because you mentioned that at the start, um, so yeah, you've got AI and all this massive potential, but the report finds, and in yours keen to emphasize that the success, it's all great to have these tools, but if the folks aren't on board, as you say, whether they don't understand all the things that they can do, or they just resisting it because they're naturally suspicious of something new. That, and let's face it, some of the headlines suggest that AI is going to take away thousands of jobs, so people are
Yeah.
maybe thinking about that. Just the ways, and like emphasize or re-emphasize how important the folks are, and I suppose importantly how you can help them to get on board with it, as opposed to sort of resisting or not embracing it as they should.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, Philip. So I mean, when it comes down to people, they're the center point, as I mentioned earlier on, and what matters is what they're trying to achieve. So if we think back at any digital transformation or any kind of process or any human behavior that actually is offered in a transformation mechanism, we have to think about what is the end goal. What are they trying to do? What are they trying to achieve for the organization? And what matters to them as people as well? So if I'm in a role, I'm a person, I walk in and I've got a role to do every day. I have tools, I have applications that help me do this, but I get fatigued. I get tired because on average, you're looking at, so you've got IAM, identity access management tools that can tell you that you're using, let's call it 260 tools on average. However, through WalkMe in particular, we can actually identify with the introduction of AI that you're using close to about 700 tools, really. So when you're going into about that mechanism of that many applications that are in front of you on a daily basis, and you're actually going cross application constantly, you're actually using different parts of it, you're trying to achieve aspects of your goal or target for that day or for that week or for that month, you're constantly having to move through applications. You're redoing mundane activities. You're redoing things over and over again. And with adoption or with WalkMe in particular, what we do is eradicate that. We take away all of the pain points. We take away all the friction. We take away all of this kind of aspect of having to redo something or not knowing how to use a particular application and getting fatigued by it, because adoption allows you to do that. We have the in-app guidance, obviously, and the in-app guidance actually focuses on human behavior. So we focus on the person's user journey. We identify through workflows what a person's supposed to be doing in that said SaaS application and how they're supposed to be accessing the said tool, but more importantly, what they're trying to achieve on the back end of it. Now, digital adoption's there to, number one, understand the person. Number two, understand what matters to the organization. And number three, catching or getting insights into why processes or user journeys are not being adhered to in the first place. So we kind of pinpoint where the failure points are, why people are dropping off at said applications, what is the fatigue rate, and then we calculate the FTE time spent on said applications on a daily basis, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and then yearly. And that is vast when you think about the time spent trying to work out how a tool works. Now let's rewind slightly more and think about traditional training. You have your compliance and risk mitigation training aspects where you go in, you do a training module, or you get taught in person, you understand the application to said degree, you walk away, and then you forget. And it's quite often the case with humans. We might remember bits and bobs of it because we have to, because it's our job, but we have to keep referring back to our manuals, our online sessions, or whatever it is that we had to use in order to get trained. What digital adoption does is eradicates all of that. It allows us to actually have the in-flight in-app guidance there in real time. So you're fundamentally, as a user, as a person, not having to come out of your application and start using something else to understand what you have to do, and thus wasting more time. So over here, centralizing the people in the new AI-centric world as well is even more important. Traditionally, we were doing it for SaaS applications, and it was great, and it's been doing wonders. But now when we think of a digital transformation in the AI era, it's even worse now, because a lot of people are going, what do I use AI for? How do I actually fundamentally do this? But going back to the question that you said about the risk of AI taking away jobs and the behavior patterns and all sorts, our ethos is that's not going to happen today. It's going to take a while for that to actually occur. But in the interim, for anything to occur and actually make sense for people, it matters how you use AI and for what purpose. And therefore, digital adoption is fundamental for that to succeed.
Okay, and I think you sort of referred to something that's picked up in the report about this software use gap, which I have to say I was flabbergasted. I can't remember the exact number, but I think it was almost the difference between how many apps are thought to be used and are actually used. I think it was almost a factor of 17 or something crazy different,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
just sounds amazing. So I mean, I'm struggling to understand how people can be so, so misunderstanding between what they think they're doing and then the reality. And I mean, the problem I think you outlined to a certain extent there, obviously, that people just get frustrated and fatigued. But I guess for the business overall, it's not great to have all these applications that potentially no one really either understands where or how they're used, etc. Yeah, so just thoughts as to what's going on there, I suppose.
Yeah, so the visibility gap is what we understand is widening quite extensively at the moment. So we have approximately 37 apps that have been identified by enterprises. They believe that's what an average user uses on average on a daily, weekly basis is 37 apps. Actually, then when you start using identity management tools to actually access what the infrastructure looks like, it's actually identifying 231 on average. And that's a report that kind of generates through IAM and allows people to understand actually there are so many other applications that people are using regularly. But with AI being introduced into the hemisphere and putting into the tech estate, it's actually increased to 625 applications. So, and we're finding that data via our own kind of mechanism through we've got our own insights and data that we use from WalkMe's perspective. So when we're in an enterprise level and we're actually going through across vast amounts of enterprises, we're now on average being able to identify how many people through IDP, and that's following somebody individually, understanding what applications they're using on a regular basis. Now AI is being introduced daily, hourly, and it's not being governed. It's being used on levels where organizations in department level, the size of organizations can vary. So you can have 50,000 people in an organization to 200,000 people, whatever it is. But in those organizations, you've got departments, you've got areas where people are walking off and they're actually going, right, we're going to go and procure this solution for, let's say, HR, for finance, for IT infrastructure, and so on and so forth. And it therefore means that we're having a vast amount of applications that generally are not being able to get governed at all, or holistically not being able to get used properly as well. So what I mean by that is people are getting into those organizations, they're actually, or those applications, and they're using them, but they're actually going, I want to use it for this purpose. Whereas the application actually has a much vast purpose. And then what happens is the organizations then spending more money and repeating that spend on more and more applications to, let's say the bar looks this big and it's quite horizontal. On that bar, they're using it for this proportion, but the application actually does more. And then they're buying more AI tools to do that proportion, that proportion, that proportion, that proportion, which means they're duplicating their spend. They're replicating the efforts involved in order to use those applications because they're new applications each time. So what digital adoption does is it helps consolidate, number one. It helps them use and utilize said applications appropriately so they start to understand how and why that's relevant to their role. And then fundamentally, over a course of time, that 600 odd applications or 631, what I mentioned earlier, starts to reduce and it becomes utilized according to your outcome. And that's why digital adoption is not a nice to have. I think previously, quite a while back, several years ago, people were like, yeah, this is great. It's a nice to have. It's an added addition to our tech estate. It's now fundamental to organization strategy. It's really important. If you don't consider digital adoption to be part of your framework or your governance, or fundamentally the success rates for a transformation to succeed, you're going to fail. You will fail. The organization will fail if they do not consider digital adoption. And WalkMe being the pioneer and the leaders in this category and the inventors of the category are ahead of the game by far. The insights we're gathering, the reports obviously you can see from Soda, and understanding the kind of repertoire and the kind of ideologies that sit place in transformations has been eye-opening to say the least.
And I guess another bit of the report suggests that employees are still having to deal with a certain amount of technology frustration. but what you've just explained there is there is a sort of fairly ready, obvious solution to this, but it's just that plenty of companies maybe haven't just caught up with what's required. So unfortunately, there are a lot of people still getting a little bit annoyed, whether, as you say, it's the number of applications, how they use them, etc. Yeah.
Absolutely, Philip. I mean, it is frustrating, but it's also daunting and overwhelming for the employee. And I think employees generally, they will come in, they get onboarded, and it takes a while. It takes quite a while. And I remember as a kind of scenario, I joined WalkMe several years ago. And when I joined, I came from a very different organization, which took a while to onboard on all of their applications, going through compliance, going through all the different things that you had to do. Coming with WalkMe, it was seamless. Very easy because obviously WalkMe, you join the organization, you're actually using the application on a daily basis to get through your day. But it's fundamentally a game changer. It makes you happier. If I'm honest, it sounds really weird, but it does. It actually gets you through tasks a lot quicker, and you're being guided by nudges. You're not being guided by forcefully being guided. And again, what we can do that, but it's very subtle in the way it works, and you don't even realize that it's happening. But you're understanding your application estate better, but you're more importantly doing the work that you're supposed to be doing, and you're getting tasks done a lot quicker. Now, we've got a vast amount of clients globally, and the ones that are adopted are called our elite adopters, who've actually started to use our technology on a regular basis. They've really seen the benefits of adoption. And what we kind of do is go, what would happen if we removed WalkMe from the estate, for example? And they'll no, 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 no. It's fundamental for us to succeed now. So we do not want to remove WalkMe from anything that we're doing right now. Digital adoption is a major facet, but the good thing about that is it's actually started to open up an entirely new category in the employment sector, which means that there are jobs in digital adoption management. There are builders and content developers. There are people that understand behavior in terms of patterns of a user journey. And all these folks are now coming to this entity or this new community of digital adoption experts. And those folks are really understanding the category more, but more importantly, what it means for a digital transformation to succeed in a vast estate of noise. And you can go into places that are like really old organizations that are quite slow in change and cannot pivot quite quickly. And all of a sudden, WalkMe's come on there and they're understanding why that's the case. They're starting to get much more insights as to where the processes are failing, how this is marrying up to people's behavior, and why people aren't using said technology, even though the investment keeps growing year on, year out. And when, organizations spending so much money but little emphasis on that is happening. And what we've got is hyperproductivity, and hyperproductivity is in the use of DApp, and that enables that productivity to grow 1,000 times more than it should be right now.
Okay, and again, I think you've partly answered my next question, but I'll ask it anyway. That the report does find the good news, if you like, is that is an increasing amount of digital adoption teams, so people are getting the message. I suppose, can you compare about how quick, well, yeah, how quickly is that growth happening? What's going on, if you like, with these digital adoption teams?
Yeah, and it's a great question. It's something that I'm actually focused on quite a lot recently as well. So we're building out something called a center of excellence across different organizations right now, and in our current client set as well. But more importantly, even outside of a client set, people are starting to understand the importance of adoption. I think there's an education factor there, which is a bit like the data journey, say 20 years ago, where people were kind of playing catch up to the whole data journey and understanding why data was really important and what it meant for an organization to succeed and how much information they could use and get the insights and action on the back of it. And that journey is something that I did many years ago, early part of my career. But coming into adoption, it's very similar in the sense that you look at BI, which is business intelligence, and then now you look at CI, which is change intelligence. And the CI part or the change intelligence part over here is actually starting to get organizations at C level to really understand that this is pivotal for success. So what they're doing, and I've seen this with some of our really big clients right now, and I can't name names, but they've come on board and said, we now need to have a separate division or a separate entity within our area that focuses horizontally across our estate in change but digital adoption, because it's part of the strategy framework for CIOs, CTOs, and CFOs, surprisingly. And they all have to fundamentally answer that question. How do we adopt? How do we get people to use applications? More importantly, how do we measure this? And are we getting the desired outcome to answer the issues that we might have been facing in the past? And has this affected our top and bottom line? So those teams organically have been starting to develop, and the maturity of that has expedited massively over the last few years. And what I've seen, I would say probably in the last year in particular, is the growth of the COE, the Center of Excellence, and that having your DAP professionals, your SMEs that understand the domains, the frameworks, and the applications they're associated with, but more importantly, understanding what change means for those individuals. And that career base is something that I think, and I'm not think I know, is going to grow more and more and more. A bit like the data science and the data kind of remit where those roles came into fruition and really expedited. I strongly believe that the same thing is happening right now with adoption.
Okay, and maybe sort of to try and summarize the impact or the potential impact of AI. Clearly, most companies will have embarked on a digital transformation journey of some sort with varying degrees of success, and there may be some that are so well advanced that they can just slot AI in seamlessly and continue. But I guess for most, is it fair to say that AI, because of its massive potential to disrupt, for good and bad, I suppose, that it's a great opportunity for people to take a pause, look at their organization, all the good, the bad things, etc., and then with AI as the main focus, see how they can sort of either adjust an existing digital transformation or come up with a fresh plan that where AI is sort of embedded because it's that important. Just your thoughts, I suppose, as to how much of a moment this is within business with AI coming along to
Yeah.
to make a big change, or is it just another IT tool, should we say?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Philip. I think it is a game changer right now. It is actually the pause and reflect right now. And I think the introduction of AI coming into fruition has allowed the ability for organizations to stop and think, how do we think differently? What do we do differently now? And how do we approach to grow our organization, become more fruitful in revenue, actually get better reputation across our industry, and I think it is a time to reflect, pause, and do that. But it can't just happen with the introduction of AI. I mean, my thoughts around that are, yeah, I mean, organizations are pushing it in and they're kind of seeing some benefit. But when you're investing so much money on AI and expecting an outcome, and the outcome is a lot smaller than the expected outcome, you're almost doing the same as what you were doing before with SaaS application transformations when you're going to the cloud. You had a very high expectation, but fundamentally kept failing, and that transformation lasted 20 years, for example, right? The same thing potentially could happen with AI if it's not done in the right way. So I think to answer your question, the first part of it is I agree completely. It is definitely a good time to stop, pause, and reflect, and then start thinking how AI is going to actually establish a new and clear direction in transformation. But at the same time, it has to have adoption in its framework. It really needs to understand that you can't just put AI in without having a digital adoption platform or thinking of change from a people perspective to ensure this happens. AI may take over people's jobs in the future, and rightly so. There's a lot of articles and reports that are out there that talk about that. But AI alone can't succeed. It will need people to do that. It will need an emphasis on people to actually help the organization grow from a cultural perspective, from a reputational perspective, from a growth perspective. There's so many different aspects here that AI depends on. And because that's centered around people, adoption matters. Change management matters, and digital adoption platforms are pivotal for that to actually succeed and exceed.
And I suppose maybe the final question is how optimistic are you or not in terms of, because you've outlined is historically whatever the hype is, whether it was virtualization, it was cloud, software as a service, etc. There's all this, and as you've outlined, it maybe takes rather longer for organizations to sort of work their way through it and understand, where they need to go with it. Are you optimistic that in this case people might get there a bit quicker, or um do you think that human nature being what it is, there will be a period of hiatus before people work out the right approach, shall we say?
I think there will be a period of hiatus. However, there will be a movement in terms of AI helping that hiatus to go through quicker, right? So it'll be the ability for AI to expedite that approach. But I do think that AI is going to make a difference. It most certainly will. There's no doubt about that from my perspective. And looking at that from an outside in to organizations from my role in WalkMe, I actually do see AI playing a pivotal role in a lot of folks' strategy. But more importantly, what I'm seeing is there is a realization in what guardrails and governance needs to be put in place for this as well. I think when you put in AI in the Wild West, it might work very quickly for a short gain, but for a long-term gain, you're going to need to do this properly, and you're going to need to bring in AI to expedite, and that curve will exceed, and it will go up. The hockey stick will go up, but I do think it needs guardrails, and it does need applications like WalkMe to be pivotal to that success, because without it, it's going to operate like the Wild West, and you'll have the successes short term, but your medium to long term goals will get forgotten, and a new thing will keep happening all the time, and you'll constantly have change fatigue. Whereas I think with adoption, your goal is in sight. You understand what you're trying to achieve over time, and yes, you can pivot, but you're pivoting for a reason rather than just being the new fad.
Okay, and maybe just finally with your sales, if it just good, I understand. I'm sure you've got stuff that you maybe can't talk about, but Walk Me 2025 and beyond, and anything particular to highlight as to what we can expect from yourselves, whether it's just growing the business, any sort of technology solutions, just anything you can share.
Yeah, I mean, as you're probably aware, we've been acquired by SAP. We are part of something called the BTM framework over there. So, going forward, we'll be working with process mining, which is Signavio, working with architecture tools like LeanIX, for example. And then we've got the people side, which sits within WalkMe. So if you think about the triage, you've got the application estate, the process estate, and then the people. And that triage is actually fundamentally what's helping the transformation grow. So we're obviously going to be involved with lots of RISE programs. We're going to be involved with lots of transformations taking place in terms of ERP, but agnostically as well. We're not just doing SAP. So I think the future for us is grand. We're working with large organizations that sit in SaaS and AI, and we have WalkMe X, which is our AI functionality as well. And we use ChatGPT in terms of understanding the kind of ability to bring in lots of indexing and lots of different aspects to fruition. But we're also road mapping our technology to become quite enhanced in our learning side of things as well. So we're bringing simulations, learning, internal learning applications into fruition there as well. Um, in terms of how we're growing and what we're doing about that is we're regionalizing across globally, so we're getting a lot more understanding of our regions, really understanding what it matters to people in those regions and how organizations are growing. And from an application product perspective, there's lots on the card, which I'm not in the privy to talk about today, but it will start to come to fruition very soon.
Okay, I mean, it's been great to chat. Some fascinating insights around the report, and digital adoption, more generally, and also a little sort of teaser, if you like, as to some things that are going on in the future. So, Vivek, really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Appreciate your time today.